What do Whitney Houston, Santana, and the Grateful Dead have in common? The golden touch of Clive Davis.
Hey, I'm Garrett, feeling pretty curious today and ready to explore this topic.
And I'm Leah, excited to dig into the world of Clive Davis with you all. Welcome to Laid Back Learning with Leah and Garrett.
Today, we're diving into the fascinating life and career of Clive Davis, a transformative figure in the music industry. I once tried to learn about music production and stumbled on how Clive Davis helped reboot Santana with the album Supernatural, the one that won a bunch of Grammys and had those massive collaborations. It made me realize how one person's vision can reroute an artist's path. That's pretty cool, right?
So let's set the scene. Clive Davis was an American record executive and lawyer who became known as one of the defining A&R minds in popular music. A&R means artists and repertoire. That's the part of a record label that scouts talent and helps shape what songs the artist records. Think talent finder and career developer rolled into one. Davis led or founded major labels and imprints like Columbia Records, Arista Records, J Records, and eventually served as chief creative officer for Sony Music Entertainment. And in terms of artists, he championed careers like Whitney Houston's and helped revitalize Santana's. That's a big arc.
And he did it with this blend of legal smarts and creative instinct. He won 4 Grammys as a producer. For example, Santana's Supernatural took Album of the Year and Best Rock Album in 2000. Kelly Clarkson's Breakaway won Best Pop Vocal Album in 2006. And Jennifer Hudson's Debut won Best R&B Album in 2009. Beyond the competitive stuff, he received the Grammy Trustees Award, a lifetime contribution recognition, and he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a non-performer. Not gonna lie, that's elite company.
Let's open the book on his early days. Clive Davis was born in Brooklyn in 1932 and grew up in Crown Heights. As a teenager, he lost both parents. After that, he moved in with his sister in Queens. It's a tough start, but he excelled academically, graduating magna cum laude from NYU and then earning a full scholarship to Harvard Law School. That legal training became his superpower later, especially when labels were restructuring or negotiating complicated deals.
So how does a Harvard-trained lawyer end up deciding which band gets signed? The path starts with him practicing law at firms in New York, and one partner, Ralph Collin, had CBS as a client. That connection brought Davis into Columbia Records, which was a CBS company. In 1960, at just 28, he joined Columbia as assistant counsel. By 1961, he was general counsel. Pretty wild career speed. Then, in 1965, he moved into operations as an administrative vice president and general manager, and by 1967, he was president of Columbia Records. That's the moment he leaned into the new wave of folk rock and roll.
Why did live shows matter so much in that era for him? They were talent accelerators. In June 1967, he attended the Monterey Pop Festival, urged by Lou Adler, who was a major producer and co-organizer of that festival. Davis saw Janis Joplin with Big Brother and the holding company and signed them fast. From there, he helped Columbia sign a broad range of artists, including Laura Nyro, Santana, and Bruce Springsteen. He also secured non-European rights to Pink Floyd, which shows he was thinking globally about catalog and territory rights, not just domestic signings.
Right? And that period was stacked. You've got Chicago, Billy Joel, Blood, Sweat and Tears, Loggins and Messina, Aerosmith. It wasn't just about chasing one sound, it was a panoramic roster. And there's this country crossover call that shows his gut instinct. He insisted Lynn Anderson release Rose Garden as a single around 1970. It became a #1 in 16 countries. That's a textbook crossover hit, meaning it jumped from a country base onto broader pop charts and into global markets. That hit's different when you're talking label strategy.
Here's another thread. In 1967, he hired Tony Orlando, who most people know as a singer, to run a Columbia publishing arm at just 23. Orlando later became a Columbia and CBS Music vice president and signed Barry Manilow in 1969. Manilow's real chart run happened later at Arista, with Davis guiding. That shows how Davis cultivated people who then spotted more talent. It's like building a talent ecosystem.
Then comes a big turn. In 1973, Rolling Stone reported that CBS fired Davis with allegations about misuse of funds and claims about drugs and payola. Payola is paying for airplay without disclosure. It's illegal. Davis denied any connection to drugs or payola. There was also an allegation he used company funds for his son's bar mitzvah. He disputed that framing in his memoir. So, controversy hit hard. But by 1974, he rebounded and founded Arista Records. That resilience matters. In music, reputation plus a track record can carry you through storms.
Arista became the next chapter of discovery. He signed or championed artists like Barry Manilow, Aretha Franklin, Dionne Warwick, and Patti Smith. Then came Whitney Houston, whom he heard in a New York nightclub. He helped guide her repertoire and image. That turned a phenomenal voice into a global superstar. Real talk. That's executive as artist-developer. And on the countryside, he co-founded Arista Nashville in 1989 with Tim Du Bois, which became home to Alan Jackson, Brooks and Dunn, Pam Tillis, and Brad Paisley. It's a genre-specific model plugged into a major's resources.
He also partnered with L.A. Reid and Babyface, two powerhouse producers and executives, to found LaFace Records in the 1990s. LaFace was home to TLC, Usher, Outkast, Pink, and Toni Braxton. And he assisted Sean Puffy Combs in creating Bad Boy Records, which included the Notorious B.I.G., Craig Mack, Mace 112, and Faith Evans. Davis later admitted he never quite understood rap music, but he empowered the experts to lead. That's good management. Set the vision, let specialists steer the culture-specific calls.
Here's where it gets really interesting. In 2000, he left Arista and launched J Records with backing from BMG. The J stood for the shared middle initial of Davis and his 4 children. J quickly gained traction, and by 2002, BMG bought a majority stake. Davis became chair and CEO of the RCA Music Group, spanning RCA Records, J Records, and Arista Records, and also chair and CEO of BMG North America. Then in 2004, BMG merged with Sony Music to form Sony BMG, and later it became Sony Music Entertainment. Davis shifted up to become Chief Creative Officer. That's a C-suite role guiding creative strategy across the company.
And the honors piled up around that time. In 2000, he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a non-performer, which was a nod to his A&R impact. That same year, he got the Grammy Trustees Award. He continued to win as a producer, like Kelly Clarkson's Breakaway in 2006 and Jennifer Hudson's Debut in 2009. He's also the namesake of the Clive Davis Institute of Recorded Music at NYU, which trains artist entrepreneurs, producers, and executives. That feels like his ethos bottled for the next generation.
Another layer to his story is personal. In 2013, at age 80, he publicly came out as bisexual in his memoir, The Soundtrack of My Life, and spoke about it on the talk show Katie. That added representation at the top levels of the music business. He later appeared on Equality Forum's list of icons of LGBT History Month in 2015. It showed openness about identity in an executive tier that's usually pretty guarded.
He stayed active in film and TV too. In 1987, he launched Clive Davis Entertainment with a first-look agreement at TriStar Pictures. A first-look deal means a studio gets the first chance to finance or distribute your projects. More recently, he produced the Whitney Houston biopic I Want to Dance with Somebody, in which actor Stanley Tucci portrayed him. That's rare for a record executive, to be a recognizable character on screen. Shows how visible he became.
In his final years, he served as Chief Creative Officer at Sony Music from 2008 through 2026. He died in June 2026 at age 94. The tributes were wide-ranging. The New York Times called him a hit-making titan, and the BBC called him one of the most influential music executives in the history of rock and pop. That kind of cross-outlet respect is, not common. It speaks to decades of shaping artists and the larger industry playbook.
All right, let's roll on to a question that still gets debated, the 1973 firing from CBS Records. Rolling Stone reported allegations about misuse of funds and alleged drugs and payola. Davis denied the drug and payola angle, and in his own account, framed it as corporate politics and expense questions that got sensationalized. Leah, how do you see that mix of claims and context?
I think it's probably a mix of fact and corporate politics. In big companies, especially in eras of transition, internal rivalries can amplify any expense controversy. And in music, the line between aggressive promotion and the perception of payola can get blurry to outsiders. So I see space for genuine issues, but also for them to be framed in the harshest possible light. What do you think, given how fast he rebounded with Arista?
I lean toward the idea that the industry can be cutthroat and sometimes overlooks personal integrity when headlines are juicier. The fact that he immediately consulted for Bell Records and then launched Arista in 1974 suggests people still trusted his A&R judgment. If peers and artists kept lining up to work with you, that told me a lot. Why would they do that if the core issue was truly fatal to his credibility?
Totally get where you're coming from. The results matter. At Arista, he built rosters that won charts and awards, and he extended into genre partnerships like LaFace and Arista Nashville. That kind of sustained success looks like vindication in practice. Even if the original controversy had some basis in internal policy questions, the long game says he was still one of the sharpest ears in the business.
Speaking of which, pop culture hasn't been shy about giving him shout-outs. Aerosmith name-checked him in the 1979 song No Surprise with the line, "Old Clive Davis said he's surely gonna make us a star." And Bob Weir from the Grateful Dead sometimes flipped a lyric in Jack Straw to "We used to play for Clive." That's a wink from the counterculture to an executive, which is not your everyday thing. Plus, Stanley Tucci's portrayal in the Whitney movie locked him in as a character people recognize.
Let's get to the heart of a big what if. What if Clive Davis had not been fired from CBS Records in 1973? If he'd stayed at Columbia and CBS, Arista might never have been born. That means Whitney Houston could have signed somewhere else, or maybe she lands at CBS through a different path, but with a different timeline and different team. The chemistry between an artist and a mentor matters. The song choices, the pacing of releases. I imagine her career could still be bright, but the texture might be different. Maybe certain iconic singles arrive earlier or later. Maybe different collaborators shape her albums. What a twist to consider.
I'm down for that mental exercise. If he stayed at CBS, Columbia's rock roster was already strong. Add the 1980s pop and R&B wave under one roof, and you get a mega label with both Springsteen-era rock and a Whitney-level pop phenomenon. That consolidation could shift how competitors respond. Maybe Arista Nashville never exists in that form, so country's 1990s surge looks different. LaFace might have partnered with a different major, changing the arc for TLC, Usher, or Outkast. And if Bad Boy's home base isn't Arista, then hip-hop label alignments in the 1990s might shuffle. Small executive moves can ripple, and this one's got legs, don't you think?
Why does one executive's presence cause that wide a ripple? Because A&R decisions are multipliers. The first yes unlocks budgets, the budgets unlock producers and songwriters, those unlock radio and press momentum. If the yes moves to a different house, the whole tree of collaborators changes. For Davis, who had that golden ear reputation, his yes carried extra weight. So the map of 1980s and 1990s pop and R&B might look recognizable, but definitely rearranged at the edges and maybe at the very top.
Before we tie a bow on it, I keep thinking about his through lines. The legal foundation that made him fearless in restructurings. The live show instinct, like Monterey Pop, that led to quick, decisive signings. And the partnership model, like LaFace and Bad Boy, that let specialists lead. And even after labels like Arista and were folded into RCA in 2011, his influence stayed. He rose to chief creative officer at Sony Music. Structure changed. His influence stayed. Yeah, that checks out.
And the legacy markers are everywhere. The Clive Davis Institute at NYU, training the next wave of artist entrepreneurs, the Clive Davis Theater at the Grammy Museum, the awards and tributes and the artists whose trajectories he shaped. It kind of gives you something to sit with. The idea that one person's ear and judgment can ripple through generations of music fans. Stay curious and keep exploring.
Catch you next time on Laid Back Learning with Leah and Garrett.